A quick notice from the Ministry of Magic. What you are about to hear is a fun, unofficial, and highly unauthorized comedic continuation of the Harry Potter universe. All events are purely the author's imagination. Mischief managed. Let the story begin. Foreword. Nearly 30 years have passed since the Great Battle of Hogwarts. The year is 2026. Magical Britain has long since recovered from the war with the Dark Lord, but it has now come face to face with a far more terrifying ordeal: corporate bureaucracy. The Golden Trio have grown up, yet their day-to-day lives look nothing like the epic tales written in history books. Hermione Granger has built a brilliant career, becoming Minister for Magic. Now, her greatest battle is attempting to drag the conservative wizarding community kicking and screaming into the 21st century. She is managing this with varying degrees of success. Harry Potter has risen to the rank of head of the Auror office. He once dreamed of catching dangerous dark wizards and saving the world, but instead he spends his days wading through a quagmire of paperwork and dealing with petty hooligans. Harry is very, very tired. Ron Weasley worked as an Auror for only a couple of years before deciding he'd had quite enough and went into business. He is now the co-owner of the wildly successful shop Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. He is fabulously wealthy, entirely unburdened by dress codes, and regularly barges into the ministry to test out new joke products on suspects in custody. This is the story of what happens after the fairy tale ends, about how difficult it is to remain a great hero in a world where the office water cooler frightens elderly wizards more than Voldemort ever did, and where reports are due by Friday. Welcome to the Ministry.
Chapter 1. Act 1. Clouds over London. Morning. The office of the head of the Auror office. Harry Potter sat at the head of the table with enormous dark bags under his eyes. In his hand was a mug bearing the inscription Boss Number 1, which, for some reason, was moaning softly and pitifully. Around him sat a group of grim, battle-hardened wizards. "The night report," Harry said wearily. "Someone has placed a perfect invisibility charm on the statue of Fudge in the atrium. Why is unclear. But this morning alone, 4 owl couriers have crashed at full speed into thin air. Until we find the counter-curse, wrap the statue in muggle yellow tape. Smith, what about the raid in Nocturn Alley?" Smith stood rigidly to attention. "Caught the gang red-handed, Chief. They were selling fake bezoars. It turned out to be nothing more than dried goat droppings coated in nail varnish." "And how exactly did you work that out?" "2 trainees poisoned themselves while taste-testing the evidence, sir." Harry buried his face in his hands. The mug groaned louder. Later, left alone in his empty office, Harry found himself complaining to the portrait of Severus Snape. "At 17, I defeated the Dark Lord. I saved the world," Harry mumbled. "But yesterday, I spent 3 hours filling out Form 4B because a drunk wizard transfigured a taxi driver into a stool and forgot how to untransfigure him. Sometimes I miss Horcruxes. At least they came with instructions." Snape, in his portrait, turned the page of his book without so much as glancing at him. "Your penchant for dramatics, Potter, remains as tiresome as ever. If a stool frightens you, take a calming draught. Though, given the intellect of your trainees, I am rather surprised they did not attempt to eat the stool." Meanwhile, a floor above, Minister for Magic Hermione Granger was fighting her own great battle. She stood by a projector in a meeting room. A blank Google Drive screen was projected onto the wall. Elite Aurors stared at it with genuine terror. The veteran Auror, Dawlish, was pointing his wand directly at the mouse cursor. "We are doing away with parchment and owls," Hermione announced brightly. "All documents will now be stored in the cloud, on Google Drive." A dead silence fell over the room. Dawlish looked anxiously out of the window at the London rain clouds. "British clouds are notoriously unreliable, Minister," he said hoarsely. What if it rains and our classified files are washed into the Thames? And who is going to fly up there to retrieve them? My broom is in for repairs. It's a metaphor, Dawlish. The documents are on servers. You simply open the folder via a link. Young Smith turned pale. A link? Like being linked in chains and sent to Azkaban for a piece of parchment. No, you just click and the file opens. The best part is we can all edit it simultaneously, in real time. Dawlish whispered to Smith in horror. Collective legilimency. She wants to get inside all our heads at once, and it requires some sort of Google. Sounds like a Scandinavian demon.
That evening, the furthest, darkest table in the Leaky Cauldron looked like a monument to bureaucratic despair. Hermione Granger and Harry Potter sat opposite one another, their eyes fixed on untouched tankards of butterbeer. They hadn't arranged to meet. Both had simply instinctively come to the one place they could hide from their subordinates. "I only gave them access to the budget document," Hermione said quietly, breaking the long silence. Her voice trembled with suppressed hysteria. "I explained everything. I showed them exactly how it works." Harry nodded sympathetically, massaging his temples. "And what was the result?" he asked. "When Dawlish and Smith opened the file and saw an anonymous pink anteater running across the screen, typing all on its own, they summoned an exorcist from the Department of Mysteries, Harry. They spent half the day trying to banish a poltergeist from the monitor with the Patronus charm. My office is covered in fire extinguisher foam because someone decided the computer was a portal to hell." At that moment, the pub's front door banged open. Squeezing through the crowd and cheerfully greeting everyone, Ron Weasley strode confidently towards their table. He was wearing a glaringly orange set of robes adorned with golden dragons and carrying a bulky, rustling bag. "Whatcha, you two? Slaves to the quill and parchment?" Ron dropped heavily into a spare chair, nearly knocking over Hermione's butterbeer. "What are we mourning? You look as though you've just kissed a Dementor." "Oro's how to use Google Drive," Harry explained grimly, "and an anonymous anteater has taken up residence in the document." Ron froze, a handful of peanuts halfway to his mouth, a look of utterly genuine, childlike wonder, so reminiscent of his father, Arthur, sparked in his eyes. "Brilliant," Ron breathed. "Tell me honestly, Hermione, what does this anteater eat inside the screen? Do you have to sprinkle crumbs into the keyboard?" Hermione wordlessly dropped her head onto the table. There was a dull thud. Harry sighed heavily and turned a hard stare on his friend. "And you, Ron, you really outdid yourself today." "Oh, come off it, Harry. It was a work matter." Weasley waved him away, tossing the nuts into his mouth. "A work matter?" Harry raised his voice, drawing the attention of a couple of patrons at the next table. "I spent 2 hours breaking that smuggler in the interrogation room. You could cut the tension with a knife. He was on the verge of cracking. He was ready to give up the entire network of cursed artifact suppliers. And then the door gets kicked open and in you stroll?" Hermione, without lifting her head from the table, turned her face towards Harry. "What did he do?" "He burst into a classified interrogation," Harry fumed, shouting, "Chief, we're testing our new office puking pastilles, stapler and despair flavor. Fancy bunking off a meeting?" Ron smirked smugly and leaned back in his chair. "And I diffused the situation. Admit it, the smuggler felt much better immediately." "He felt better?" Harry almost shouted, but quickly lowered his voice, remembering where he was. "That murderer asked you for a dry parchment-flavored pastille so he wouldn't have to go to Azkaban." "And I helped him out," Ron stated proudly, turning to Hermione, who was now staring at him with undisguised horror. "I offered him our bestseller, False Death Lollipops. Pulse drops to 0, Dementors panic, and you get carried out of prison feet first. 10% discount for repeat offenders." "You sold joke products to a suspect during an interrogation with the head of the Horror Office?" the Minister for Magic enunciated syllable by syllable. "I'm a marketing genius, Hermione." Ron slapped his hand on the table. "Do you know what happened next? He bought 3 pastilles and a lollipop. 5 galleons pure profit. I wrote him a receipt right there in the ministry. I swear, when I was telling a little first year about it in the shop today, he looked at me like I was a hero." Harry and Hermione exchanged a look. The two most powerful magic users in Britain, the conquerors of Voldemort, felt utterly defeated. "Do you know what the most insulting part is?" Harry said quietly, looking at a beaming, thoroughly content Ron. "What?" "That in our second year I saved your sister from the Chamber of Secrets, and you didn't even offer me a corporate discount on those bloody pastilles. I've got a briefing with Dawlish tomorrow, and I could really do with the taste of despair." Ron broke into a broad grin and reached into his rustling bag. "First dose is free for friends, Harry. Welcome to adulthood." Harry had just unwrapped the crinkly wrapper of the glaringly orange pastille when the front door of the Leaky Cauldron opened once again. This time there was no noise or special effects. Percy Weasley crept into the pub, nervously glancing around. The head of the Department of Magical Transportation looked as though he had just been put through a spin cycle for washing robes. His tie was askew, his glasses were fogged up, and in his hands he convulsively clutched a stack of printed A4 paper. The white, muggled paper in his hands looked as unnatural as a wand in the claws of a goblin. Spotting their table in the dark corner, Percy hurried over to them. "Minister," he exhaled, collapsing into a spare chair. "Harry, Ronald, oh heavens, why are you here too?" "I'm providing moral support to the state apparatus," Ron replied nonchalantly, tossing a peanut into his mouth. "What's happened, Percy? You look like someone's moved your favorite hole punch and failed to fill out a return form." Percy slammed the stack of papers onto the table, right in front of Hermione. It's your Google, Minister," he said in a tragic whisper. "Your new automated public procurement system. It's malfunctioned." Hermione paled. She slowly pushed her tankard of butterbeer away. "What happened, Percy? Clearly, and without panicking. Have we ordered too much parchment? Did we buy hippogriff feed instead of ink again?" "If only," squeaked Percy. "The system was supposed to automatically purchase a year's supply of equipment for the Auror office, for Harry's people. Veritarism, antidotes, new enchanted handcuffs, and standard invisibility cloaks. I set the filters. I typed in the keywords, just as you taught me." Harry tensed. As head of the office, he knew that their warehouse stocks were critically depleted. "And what exactly arrived at the warehouse?" Harry asked, sensing an impending catastrophe. Percy turned an agonized gaze upon Ron. 500 boxes, Percy groaned, burying his face in his hands. 500 massive, brightly colored boxes. Google decided that since Ronald is my brother, the algorithms should select him as a reliable supplier by familial ties. This internet of yours factored in our family tree, Hermione. Ron choked on a peanut. Harry's eyes slowly widened. "Hold on," said Potter softly. "Are you telling me that sitting in the classified combat wizard's warehouse right now are—" "Yes!" Percy was almost in tears. "Instead of veritarism, we now have 300 liters of strawberry-flavored babbling syrup. Instead of titanium anti-magic handcuffs, we've got self-tying Chinese finger traps. And instead of invisibility cloaks—" Percy squeezed his eyes shut, unable to go on. "What arrived instead of the cloaks, Percy?" Hermione asked quietly, with terrifying calmness. Ron suddenly broke into a blissfully happy, incredibly proud smile. "Oh, I know. I had an entire wholesale batch of exhibitionist cloaks bought out just yesterday. Brilliant invention. They turn you completely invisible, but every 3 minutes they yell loudly at the top of their lungs, 'Yoo-hoo! I'm over here! Look at me!' Absolute hit of the season for Hufflepuff parties." A deathly silence hung over the table. Tom, the bartender, at the other end of the room, was melancholically wiping glasses, oblivious to the fact that Magical Britain's defensive capabilities were currently collapsing. "So," Harry took off his glasses and began slowly wiping them with the edge of his robes, "tomorrow morning my best combat wizards are heading out on a raid in Nocturn Alley. They will be hunting down a highly dangerous gang of dark wizards, but instead of sneaking up undetected, their cloaks will be yelling, 'Yoo-hoo!' And when they catch the criminals, they will bind their fingers with a Chinese toy and serve them delicious strawberry syrup." Percy nodded guiltily. "And that's not all," he whispered, staring at the table. "Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, an inspection committee from the International Confederation of Wizards is arriving to test the readiness of the British Aura Office against new threats." Hermione dropped her head onto the table for the second time that evening. Harry looked at the glaringly orange pastille in his hand. The stapler and despair flavor didn't seem like such a bad prospect anymore. Only Ron Weasley sat there with an absolutely beaming expression. He leaned closer and affectionately, in a husbandly manner, stroked his wife's tousled hair. "Darling, whatever are you getting so worked up for?" Ron said affectionately, pushing the plate of nuts towards her. "Look on the bright side. Harry's lot are in for an excellent team-building exercise. Besides, you were complaining to me over breakfast that the auras had become too tense, gloomy, and had absolutely no idea how to relax as a team. I, as your loving husband, have simply helped you fulfill your plan to improve the workplace atmosphere." Hermione lifted her head from the table. A desire to cast an unforgivable curse right there in the middle of the pub was clearly readable in her eyes. "Ronald Bilious Weasley," the Minister for Magic whispered menacingly, articulating every single word, "if you do not figure out a way, right this very second, to replace 500 boxes of your clownish knickknacks with genuine invisibility cloaks and veritaserum by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, you will be sleeping on the sofa tomorrow night." "Hermione, come on, be serious," Ron tried to smile. "On the sofa in Harry's office," she finished ruthlessly, "until the end of the year, and your meals will be cooked by the trainees who gorged on goat droppings today." Ron gulped nervously. The smile vanished from his face instantly, replaced by a look of profound businesslike concentration. "Understood. Acknowledged." Ron turned sharply to his friend. "Harry, old chap, I will use all my knowledge, all my skills. After all, I destroyed a Horcrux in my time. Do you really think I can't solve this problem? If we have to, we will work all night as a team, just like the good old days. And just out of curiosity, does the sofa in your office pull out into a bed?"
Chapter 1, Act 2, A Deal in Nocturn Alley, continued. The clock on the Ministry Tower struck midnight. A thick scent of black coffee and hopelessness hung in Harry Potter's office. Hermione sat at her husband's desk, massaging her temples and reviewing the inspection schedules. Percy Weasley paced nervously from corner to corner, muttering excerpts from the Magical Law Enforcement Code regarding the embezzlement of state property. Ron paced the center of the office, periodically checking his enchanted watch. "Right, here is the plan," Ron began briskly, clapping his hands. "My lads at the warehouse are currently tallying up the boxes of exhibitionist cloaks. The moment they finish, we load the whole lot onto Festrals and head to the meeting." "What meeting, Ronald?" asked Harry in a hollow voice, staring up at the ceiling from where he lay on the leather sofa. "With Horace Fang," Ron replied, unfazed. "He is the official combat gear supplier for the Aura office, the bloke who was supposed to win this Google tender of yours if the system hadn't chosen me. I sent him an owl. We're meeting at 1 in the morning behind the White Wyvern in Nocturn Alley." Harry sat up sharply on the sofa.
You set up a meeting with Horace Fang? Ron, have you lost your mind? He's the most paranoid, ruthless, and dangerous merchant in all of Britain. He's got more scars than Mad-Eye Moody, and instead of a left hand, he's got a crossbow that fires curses. And you are going to propose a barter to him? Hermione looked up in sheer horror. Trade his elite combat gear, which costs thousands of galleons, for your joke crackers and strawberry syrup? Ron, he'll kill you before you can even say loyalty discount. Hermione, precious, Ron smiled charmingly and adjusted the collar of his glaringly orange robes. You are the Minister for Magic. You think in terms of laws and budgets. Harry thinks in terms of duels and arrests, but I am a businessman. I know how to talk to people. Fang is just a tough bloke who needs to be offered a lucrative deal. Harry and Hermione exchanged a glance. Percy, Harry commanded, standing up from the sofa and pulling on his Auror cloak. You stay here. Keep an eye on the warehouse. Hermione, prepare the paperwork in case we have to process this as a confiscation. I'm going with Ron. If Fang fires a crossbow at him, someone needs to be quick enough to cast a shield charm. Oh, let it rest, Harry. Ron brushed him off, heading towards the Floo Network fireplace. It'll go smoothly. The most important thing is the presentation.
At 1 o'clock in the morning, Nocturn Alley was shrouded in a thick, sticky fog that smelled of dampness and rotting cabbage. The backyard of the White Wyvern pub was illuminated only by the dim glow of a single gas lamp, around which fluttered fat, suspiciously toothy moths. Ron stood beneath the lamp, whistling a jaunty tune and rocking on his heels. Behind him towered a mountain of 500 brightly colored boxes bearing the Weasley's Wizard Wheezes logo. Harry stood in the shadow of the rubbish bins, clutching his wand in his pocket. A figure stepped silently out of the fog. Horace Fang was massive. He wore a battered leather coat made of basilisk skin, impenetrable by any known curse. His face was a mosaic of scars, and in place of his left hand, there really was a compact, menacingly gleaming silver crossbow bolted on. Fang stopped 5 paces from Ron and slowly surveyed the cheerful red-haired young man and the mountain of boxes. "Weasley," Horace rasped. His voice sounded as though he gargled with broken glass. "Your owl woke me up half an hour ago. You wrote that the Ministry made a mistake, and my stock, prepared for the Auror office, is still sitting in my warehouse." "The absolute truth, Mr. Fang," Ron nodded joyfully, taking a step forward. In the shadows, Harry tensed, ready to draw his wand. "And you wrote," Fang slowly raised his crossbow, aiming it at Ron's chest, "that you wish to make an exchange, my finest invisibility cloaks, enchanted with dragon's blood and the purest veraceratum, for this." He nodded disdainfully at the bright boxes. "What's in them, Weasley?" the merchant growled. "Leprechaun gold? Rune spore horn? Or did you decide that Horace Fang is an idiot you can play games with?" "No games at all, Mr. Fang, just pure profit." Ron was not the least bit fazed by the weapon pointed at him. He walked briskly to the nearest box and sliced it open with a penknife. "You see, Horace, may I call you Horace? The armaments market is stagnating. Harry Potter's Aurors have locked everyone up. There are no major wars. No one needs your invisibility cloaks in peacetime. They are gathering dust in warehouses. You are operating at a loss." Fang narrowed his eyes. The crossbow did not waver. "And I am offering you business diversification." Ron pulled a bundle of shimmering fabric from the box. "Look at this, the exhibitionist cloak. Brilliant invention." Ron threw the cloak over his shoulders. His figure instantly vanished, melting completely into thin air. Fang raised an eyebrow in surprise. The quality of the invisibility was flawless. Suddenly, the empty space where Ron had just been standing bellowed deafeningly, echoing down Nocturn Alley in a deep male voice.
"Yoo-hoo! I'm over here! Everybody look at me! I am absolutely naked and invisible! Yoo-hoo!" Curses rained down from the windows of the White Wyvern. Someone hurled an empty fire whiskey bottle into the fog. Ron threw off the cloak and became visible once more. He beamed with pride. "Did you see that?" he shouted cheerfully at the startled Fang. "You sell gear for assassins and spies, and I am offering you a way into the market of school pranks, student parties, and stag do's. Do you know what the profit margins are on merchandise for Hogwarts students? They buy this stuff by the ton. You won't have to hide in dark alleys anymore, Horace. You will be the king of parties in Diagon Alley." Horace Fang stared at Ron with a long, unreadable gaze. In the shadows, Harry held his breath, preparing to cast Expelliarmus. Finally, Fang slowly lowered his crossbow. The silence of the alley was shattered by a hoarse barking sound. Fang was laughing. "Yoo-hoo, eh?" the grim merchant wheezed, wiping a tear from his scarred cheek. "Merlin's pants, Weasley. I've got a son in Gryffindor. He'd kill for a cloak like that." Ron beamed and pulled a phial of pink liquid from his pocket. "Oh, just you wait. You haven't even tried the strawberry syrup that makes a person sing non-stop limericks about goblins. I swear, it's a bestseller." Fang walked up to the mountain of boxes, kicked one with a heavy dragonhide boot, and nodded decisively. "All right, Ginger, you win. My stock is in the hangar behind the pub. Load up your crackers and take the cloaks. But mark my words, if this syrup doesn't work on my son, I will find you and turn you into an umbrella stand." Harry exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from his muscles, and stepped out of the shadows. "Deal closed." Ron gleefully shook Fang's good hand. "Harry, mate, bring our thestrals over here. We have exactly 6 hours to save my wife's career."
Chapter 1, Act 3, A Morning of Reckoning. Dawn broke over London, gray and unwelcoming. But inside the Ministry of Magic, it was hotter than the mouth of a volcano. At 9:45 a.m., Hermione Granger stood in the main atrium. She looked immaculate. Tailored robes, neat hairstyle, not a single crease out of place. Only the slight twitching of her left eye betrayed the fact that over the past 24 hours she had drunk 5 cups of pepper-up potion and read the manual for Google Drive 3 times. Harry stood beside her. His aurors were lined up in a perfect row. All were clean-shaven, sharp, and clad in brand-new, heavy invisibility cloaks, courtesy of Horace Fang. Smith, standing at the end of the line, swayed occasionally, but overall he looked alive.
"Did Ron definitely replace everything?" Hermione asked in a whisper, barely moving her lips. 500 boxes, Hermione," Harry replied just as quietly. "We spent all night hauling them into the warehouse. If there's anything left of the wheezes in there, it'll be some small trifle no one will notice." At that moment, the delegation from the International Confederation of Wizards stepped out of the Floo Network fireplaces, which flared with green flames. It was led by Lord Octavius Vane, an elderly, stiff French wizard with a monocle and an expression that suggested a rotten dragon egg had been thrust under his nose. "Minister," Vane said coldly, kissing Hermione's hand, "we have arrived to ascertain whether the British Auror Office is truly prepared for modern threats, or if you are squandering the budget on these computer innovations of yours." Hermione forced a tight smile. "We have prepared a demonstration for you, Lord Vane, if you would please follow me to the training hall." It was quiet in the dueling hall. The members of the committee settled themselves in the stands, jotting things down on their parchments with long, sharp quills. "Right," began Harry, stepping into the center of the ring. "We shall now demonstrate the apprehension of a dangerous criminal using state-of-the-art equipment. Smith, front and center." Smith stumbled forward. He was to play the role of the dark wizard. To begin with, Harry pulled a phial of clear liquid from his belt pouch. We shall use a next-generation Veritaserum. Smith, drink. Harry poured 3 drops into a glass for Smith. The trainee drank, squeezed his eyes shut, and suddenly his face was flooded with a bright pink blush. "Oh, Chief," Smith sang in a thin, melodic voice, "do you know, your eyes are as deep as the lakes in the Forbidden Forest, and those robes, they really accentuate your strong jawline. I write poetry at night about how you fill in Form 4B. Silence fell over the stands. The monocle dropped from Lord Vane's eye. Harry froze, his mouth hanging open. He slowly looked down at the file. On the bottom, in tiny lettering, it read, "Strawberry Romantic Syrup. Warning, causes an overwhelming urge to declare your love to your superiors." "This is, psychological pressure applied to the criminal," Hermione blurted out from the stands, leaping to her feet. "We force the enemy to feel maximally uncomfortable. Carry on, Potter." Harry gulped nervously and snatched a pair of handcuffs from the table. "Now for the apprehension. We use anti-magic shackles." He lunged at Smith, who was still attempting to hug him, and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists. But instead of a metallic click, there was a soft pop sound. Smith's hands were wedged tightly into a bright lime-green braided tube. "What is this? A drinking straw?" Vane croaked, stepping down from the stands. "Are you mocking the Confederation?" "It's a Chinese finger trap," spoke up Ron, who had suddenly materialized behind Vane in his orange robes. "The final word in non-lethal weaponry. The harder the criminal struggles, the tighter it holds." "Rubbish," Vane barked, and eager to prove the uselessness of the device, he reached sharply for his wand. "I will obliterate this with a curse this instant." But at that very moment, something nobody expected happened. Vane yanked his wand from the inside pocket of his robes with such ferocity that he accidentally dropped a small black sphere along with it. The incredibly rare and forbidden artifact, the Eye of Darkness, clattered onto the stone floor and began to pulse ominously with black flames. Vane paled. He had clearly been trying to smuggle the artifact into the ministry and had just exposed himself. "Seize him!" Harry shouted. Vane, realizing he was caught, attempted to apparate, but Smith, still under the influence of the romantic syrup, decided to play the hero. With a cry of, "I will protect your jawline, Chief!" the trainee threw himself to intercept, tripped over his own bound hands, and crashed with all his weight straight into Lord Vane, knocking him to the floor. The French spy struggled desperately beneath the heavy trainee. Reaching a free hand towards the evidence table, he felt for an invisibility cloak, threw it over himself, and vanished instantly into thin air, hoping to crawl quietly towards the exit. But the training hall was immediately filled with a deafening, joyous bellow that rattled the windows. "Yoo-hoo! I'm over here! Look at me! I am an old French spy, and I am absolutely invisible! Yoo-hoo!" Vane, now invisible, tried frantically to throw off the exhibitionist cloak, but it was shouting so loudly that Harry simply walked towards the sound and ended the duel with a well-aimed stunning spell.
An hour later, Hermione's office. The confiscated Eye of Darkness artifact lay on the desk. Lord Vane, bound in ordinary ropes, just to be safe, awaited transport to Azkaban. The remaining members of the committee looked stunned. "That was innovative," Vane's deputy muttered, quickly signing the inspection report. "A psychological attack via declarations of love, locking of hand motor skills, and that brilliant acoustic detection system for invisible targets. Britain has truly taken a massive leap forward. We will be giving you top marks." As the door closed behind the committee, Hermione practically collapsed into her chair and covered her face with her hands. "Ron," she said a minute later, peering at her husband through her fingers, "you left a box of wheezes in the warehouse on purpose?"
Ron turned slowly. In his mind, a memory from the previous night flashed brightly. 3:15 in the morning, a dark warehouse. He accidentally drops the fifth box behind a heavy forklift. He stares at it for a long time, feels his back aching, yawns, and says to himself, "Oh, never mind, nobody will notice one missing cardboard box among 500, and wanders off to drink coffee. Ron leaned back against the windowsill, shoved his hands into his pockets, and smiled, a patronizing, slightly enigmatic smile. "You see, Hermione, well, you both know me. I'm a businessman," Weasley said smoothly. "I have a nose for people. The moment I laid eyes on this vein, I knew right away, rotten to the core. I calculated all the risks and deliberately left behind one box containing the strawberry syrup and the finger trap. It was a multi-layered strategy, a tactical ploy to expose the mole in the committee." Hermione looked at her husband with slight suspicion, but nevertheless with genuine gratitude. Harry nodded approvingly, and only Ron himself knew that next time he would actually have to count the boxes. "Well then, at your service," Ron concluded proudly. "And now let's go to the Leaky Cauldron. Butterbeers are on me. By the way, Hermione, on that Google Drive of yours, some anonymous mallard deleted the budget plan for next week. I think it was Dawlish. He thought a mallard was a virus and tried to stab the monitor with his quill." Hermione sighed, smiled, and stood up from her desk. "Go. But tomorrow, Ron, tomorrow you are going to teach Dawlish how to use a mouse. Consider it your new marital duty. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapter of The Ministry."